The recording is being started. Okay. So, what is a temporary table? So we have seen like creating multiple tables around like our databases. We have created a sample table called uh, employee yesterday. So these are all like multiple tables that have been that we created throughout our session, and our sessions like multiple, and those tables are stored in the databases permanently unless we delete them explicitly. Those are going to stay in the memory forever. So there is a certain thing called temporary table. What this actually does is that it's obviously same as the actual table, but the thing is it goes on like it goes or like the memory of the temporary tables. I mean, the allocated memory for the temporary tables will get deallocated once the session is cut off. That means that whenever we connect to our database, say, let's say I've connected to this particular connection. So let me disconnect this. So this is how my screen will be at the first moment. So I would go and connect to one particular like database engine. Say. That time we will be getting this particular screen. You guys can see this pop-up window. This asks for server name and authentication type, and if it is SQL Server authentication, that would be a different login ID and password. So whenever you do some operations or whenever you work on a real time, so you will be getting SQL Server authentications credentials by default. So Windows authentication, it's rarely used in the organization level unless the roles have been set very much defined and very much properly. So when we connect this, session for my user will get started. My user's session will get started. When I just go and try to disconnect this, the session will be end at that particular time. So this we call it a session when user logs in, and by the time user logs out, that particular period of time in between the logout and login, that we call as session. So temporary tables are the tables which will be stored in memory only till that particular time, which is in the session. So it will be available only in the session. So that is a temporary table. So how do we create temporary tables? So that's what we are gonna discuss in as in the basic one. The first step. The one way is that like into temp table, and before that we would obviously need what and all we are going to select, and select into some table name from employee table that we created yesterday. Let's try executing this. So just says query executed successfully, but this is the one of the way that I can create a temporary table, which is this. So if I select from this temporary table, I have the data, which is almost same as all the details that are available in the employee table. Let's execute this. Sorry, the keyword from is missed here. is the same value. So this is one way that we can create a temporary tables like when we're going through a particular execution plan or execution plan or whatever it is. And another way of creating temporary table is the normal way of creating table, but the table name is gonna suffixed with hashtag. So let's say create table. After that, we should be giving table name in here. So usually we do that. So for that, the table name will be prefixed with hashtag. So this says that this particular table that we are creating now is temporary table. So I would say temporary employee and as usual creation of this with ID as integer and name with varchar of 120. So this is one way. This is another way of creating temporary table. We just create it and later on we go on inserting the data into temporary tables. So as this command it is combined completely successfully. And let's see the temporary tables data. It has nothing in nothing. The data is like nothing. So let me check if it has in here. Table. This is the one we created in here with select into table. So with this, I mean, this is one way of creating it, but our hashtag temp employee table is not visible inside this particular like master database under that tables. So this will be present. If I'm not wrong, here it will be. Here it is. Temp table dbo hash temp employee, which we created just a moment back. So this is a temporary table and it can hold like any of the data. So let me insert into employee hashtag temp employee table as well. So for that I would just insert into values just the number 01, let's say 9, the employee ID is 9 and the name is one of the participants. Let's say Babu. Let me insert this as well. There's one row affected and we get the data of ID with 9 and the content with Babu. And let me try to show you if we still have the temporary table even after the connection, like after the disconnection and the connection. So let me disconnect to this and connect again for a database engine that is this. Let me check if my temporary tables is available or not. So it is under temp DB and temp tables. It still has. So one way of deleting it is that once the connection is being lost and the like all the database transactions or whatever the operations that are being performed on the temporary tables are completed, at time this particular temp table will be deleted permanently. So no data will be available or like no access will be there on the temp table. So this is another way of creating temp table. And we have another way. Let's say like same as the select into. And let's say I want to select all into hashtag temp employee one from employee. So this is another way of creating another temp table, like the temp table, but another way of creating it. So let's select the data from here as well. So this is about the temp table creations. And when we actually use the temp table is that whenever we use uh, certain like data processing inside the stored procedures or triggers or even in the functions that are like user defined functions, when there is a requirement that we need to store some data into one particular object and we have to perform some operations on it, the first option that we go to is temporary tables. And we have another options such as cursors and table variables to do the same operations. But those are the different ones that we keep doing on it. This we can say is as a local temporary table. And we have another one. It's called global temporary tables, which can be created saying, giving the name suffixed by two hash tables. Table name. So this is how we just create a global temporary table. So we just have to suffix with two hashtags just before the table name that we are going to provide. Just a moment, I'll be back. Yeah, I'm back, guys. So far, any doubts? So creation of the global temporary table is same as creating a normal table and as well as creating temporary table in these ways, the above mentioned ways, and the accessibility. So whenever we create a temporary table that can be accessed within that procedure or within that particular session, who's actually created it, who has actually created it. So coming for the global temporary tables, like anybody like can create it, and anybody who's connected to that particular database with like within like any with any number of connections, they can use that particular global database table, and that will be the global temporary table will be deleted after we close the connection. The creator who has created the global temporary table has to close his connection, and then all the transactions that are being performed on that particular global table has to be completed. At that moment, that particular global temporary table will be demolished, in the sense that it can be cleared off in all goes. So this is all about the temporary tables. So any doubts so far? Thank you. And the other one I wanted to discuss today is about uh, the table variables, which is very much quite frequently asked interview question. So you might have heard what is like temporary variables, how we create it, and what are system variables, how we access them, and what are table variables. So table variables is nothing but when we create a variable, we just store a value to it. We just store a value into it. So same way, table variable is the one which has the structure of a table. So when we are required to store the data or store the number of records from other tables on to process, and we will be keeping that under what we say table variables. So for that, the way of creating is same as creating a variable. So we will be creating variable as with declare keyword, declare, and followed by a variable name, which is like counter, which is of type int. Same way, we are gonna the counter has to be always prefixed with @ symbol. So then it can be considered as a temporary variable. And the same way, we can create a temporary how we say table variable as well. For that, what I should do is that I would say a declare variable and followed by at symbol to make it as a variable, and I will give my name as table var. So this is my table variable name followed by the type table and followed by the parentheses, which consists of columns and its data types. Like whatever number of columns that we can go it on, we can just go on with that. So we can say, for example, declare read table var, which is of table. So with this keyword table and declare, we can say that this table var is of system, sorry, the table variable, which has a scope of the procedure scope. So whatever it's same as like local variables scope. So whenever we create a local variable inside a function or a stored procedure, that will be active only throughout that execution time of function or procedure. So same way, this table variable, it will be active and the memory will be allocated only through that moment of time, only through the execution time of a procedure or a function. So here open, and we say column as some ID, which is of int, comma, name, which is of var. Let's go with n varchar this time, which can store like 25 characters. For that, I would mention the character length of 50. So this is how I can create a table variable. So we learned about temporary tables. So that is where we actually create a physical structure of a table, and it can be stored in one of the temporary databases in our SSMS or the SQL Server. So that is that temporary table is deleted only when the session is logged out or the connection is being closed. But this particular what you call the table variable will be cleared off at the at the end of the store procedure or whatever we created within the object. So inserting the data into table variable is same as the table structure. So here we have created a table variable with ID as integer and name as with nvarchar. Just a moment, guys. Yep, it is same as inserting any value into a table. We just go with insert command and insert into table name the same way. So that is how I can say like insert into, and the table name would be table var, which is a table variable. And his ID would be 2 and his name would be let's say Martin. Let me execute this. It has one row affected. So this is how I create table variables and I insert into table variable names. So one of the other way is also there to insert data into table table variable. That is about like inserting to, and we followed by the @ symbol and followed by table variable name table var and followed by select command. So this is one of the other way one of the other ways to insert some data into table variables. And are we clear on that? And the same way we can get the data from the table variables as well. So that is just that we perform a select operation from table variables. That is that select start from table var. So that is all it does. And there are some limitations on the table variables. So first is that after you define a table variable structure, let's say I have created here my table variable with only ID and name. Once it is created, that is it. We can't alter this table variables structure. So that is one disadvantage of it. It's not a disadvantage. It's actually a restriction on the table variable. The second is that whenever we do a query optimization or any of the query optimization plans, we would actually go to query execution plan and see what is going on and how much time is taking on each and everything. So in that particular thing, and the table variables cannot give any statistics or any of the data associated with execution plan, such as like what is the execution time and what is the object that is like taking much time and all stuff. And one more thing, you can't use table variable as like parameter, let's say output parameter for any of the functions or any of the stored procedure execution. So whenever we are executing a stored procedure or anything, we just define something and we use output parameter to get the data out of this, uh, to return something from the procedure. For that, we cannot use table variables. I mean, table variable cannot be a output parameter. So that is how we create table variables and different ways of making use of it. And what else we left with today? Let's go to our core topic today, the user-defined functions. So what is actually a function? A function is a object which can be called anywhere from the stored procedure and does some task and return a value. That value can be of scalar value in the sense like one-dimensional data, which is of one value. We can say just one value, which could be of any data type. Let's say integer, string, date, money, whatever the data type you name it, it can return the stuff. And we have multiple like the function which can return multiple tables. Let's say a table. For that, we call the table valued function. So it's also a user-defined function, but it returns the particular value. I mean, the particular table data as an output. So let me create a function. If you could notice in my previous sessions, whenever I create a particular object, I have you in such a way that every create statement has object name followed by create command. So we create table using create table and we create a procedure using create procedure. These are like object names, and for the functions we use create function in followed by function name, which is of let's say demo function, demo func, just the short form, which can take input parameters as well. So the input parameters, we define it as like the same way we define it for the procedures. So iterate ID, which is of integer type, and what it actually returns, that we should give. Returns var. I want to say my demo function. Let's rename it some other function. Get name of EMP. So what my get name of the employee function does is that it just takes the employee ID and it performs like it gets all the details from the database and finds the name of the particular past employee ID and returns that particular name. So this particular name is of nvarchar data type. So nvarchar of some, let's say 50, And here goes the starting of the function as, and we give begin and end. So in between this, I would just give my the name as an output. So select name from employee, where ID is equals to @ID, which is passed in here. So by this, I just selected what do you call the name from the employee table, which should be like returned for as my function output. So for that, what I would do, I would just give return. So this is the return. This particular return is the keyword which we use to return some value to a function caller. And this is the structure of creating basic function. Create followed by object type and followed by object name, which can type if it has any input parameters that we give in here, and returns like whatever the returns the value like the return type. In the other programming languages, we call it return type. So here, the type of the value that the function is going to return, we mention it here in the return statement, and as well as begin and end, which is common. And in between, like at the end of the function execution, we use return statement to return the values, certain value from the what do you call the function. Let me execute it. So what it says, written statements in the scalar variable function must include an argument. Okay, let's not do this. Instead of that, we'll create another temp variable. What it says, incorrect syntax near the temp. For now, let's do another thing to keep it very simple. Let's pass it on whatever the value that we got from the function input parameters. So I would mention int and I would give @ID. Let's see how it goes. It says command completed successfully. This is a scalar value function. So to execute this particular function, to get a particular scalar value from the function, and to call a function and get the scalar value function from that particular as an output. So for that, we just call it as select and followed by call passed by some key. So what it returns is that So did we execute this? It says already we have it. So how do we call a function? So that's where our what is it? Let's see if we have our function name like in the object explorer or not. Let's see, we have created it in the masters, and we go to programmability and we go to functions. So we have scalar value function that we created. So this is, we have it, dbo dot get name of emp. So that is our function name. If you want to view about it, this is the one that we created. Let's say dbo dot get emp. It says output 3. So what we missed here, the schema name has to be available in order to say that where to get my function from. So this is a scalar value function, which actually takes any number of input parameters, but only gives one value as in the output. Let me alter my function. For that, what I should be doing is that instead of the create, we just use alter function. Alter function name, and I would say param1, which is a one, which is an int, and at rate p2, which is also an int, and at rate p3, which is also an integer variable, and it returns sum of p1, p2, p3. p1 plus at rate p2 plus at rate p3. So let's execute this function. See, notice here that I did not change any name of my function, but I changed parameters and the output, the value. So let me execute this. It says command completed successfully. If I execute this is going to throw me an error that parameters not being supplied. So let's see that as well. It says insufficient number of arguments passed. So let me take the opportunity to give all the parameters and let's execute this. It says 12 as output. So this is a scalar value function, which actually takes a number of parameters, but only gives one value as an output. So this is about just calling a function, how do we call it, and creating a function, and how do we alter the function. And we have one more thing to drop the function, which is a with a keyword called a drop, which is like, you have seen it like most of the times. We use the drop command just to like drop the what do you call the function from the database table. Sorry, the databases. Drop is not the function, Jyotisha. It is just a statement that actually drops. Yep, drop function. Drop function followed by function name. So whatever the object we create or modify or drop, we should use drop command and followed by the object type and followed by the object name. Let's drop our function that we created, get name of emp. Let's execute this. It says commands completed successfully, and let's try to get call it. It says it could not find it. So
class into
So this is about basic details about the functions, and this is about basic about the scalar functions. And scalar function is the one that it actually takes any number of parameters, but only gives one particular value as an output. And we have another one called table valued functions. So table valued function is the one. This is also same as user defined function, but the return type will be a table. So whenever we create a user defined scalar function, its return type will be any of the data types that are available in the SQL server. But when we have to create a user defined table valued function, it actually returns a table. So for that, I would say create function. I will call my function demo function, and followed by what we should be giving. We can give a number of parameters if the function expects anything. If not, can just go on to the next lines, which is returns. This is mandatory to specify a function that what would be its return value. So I'm going to say it returns a table, and I take it as and followed by select start from employee. Let me execute this. What it says? Incorrect syntax near the keyword returns. Okay, what did we do here? Return stable, but we just selected here. This should work. Oh. So here we have one more thing, that function is always taking some input as mandatory. So here I have executed my function, and it should be available in here. Let me refresh. Let me refresh my database, and let's go to programmability and go on to functions. Previously, we had to go to a scalar value function to get the get name of the employee function to get some to see if it is present or not. Now it is a table valued function. See, demo func is available in the table valued function. Like if we have system created functions, that will be available inside this. Again, system defined functions are of two types: table valued and scalar value. Scalar value is that so all the aggregate functions and string functions fall under scalar value function. So this is how we create a table valued function, and how to get details or execute a table valued function. For that, we have created it successfully. And let's say previously we just used select command and followed by function name to execute something up to get an output from the function. So here at that time, my particular scalar valued function returning only one value. For that, I can directly use select. But now my particular table valued function is returning multiple values. For that, I should use this. Select star from demo function, which takes a dummy parameter. Let me give one. It will actually get me all the details of the employee. So this is about this. If we insert some other values into this particular table, let me insert that as well. Inserting to employee values. I have mentioned ID as identity column, so I don't need to enter anything into ID column. So it obviously takes the next available integer. So the name is B, and the age is some 30. The salary is of some $9,000. Let me insert. It says $1 and I want to get the details from my table valued function. Let me execute this, and it returns all the values as the same. And if we want to modify our table valued function, we use that like same way we created and we create a function. We use alter command instead of this create. So that would give that can give a provision to like modify my table valued function. So here, if you could notice, I have created my table valued function with only a single statement, that is return select star from employee. Return select star from employee. What if I want to create multiple statements, like my function is consisting of multiple statements? So for that, I would say begin and end. So this is how I create multiple statements, table valued functions, multi-statement table valued function. We can call that. So for that, we just go to begin and end. So this is about multi-statement table valued function, which actually returns our data as in tables in the form of tables, and which can actually take any number of input parameters. So this is about complete information about the user-defined functions. So far, if there is any doubts, you can call it on. Please, no doubts. Thank you. I guess we are clear enough with the temporary tables and temporary variables, and as well as the ones we discussed today, user-defined functions. In that, again, scalar value functions and table variables again. And again, table valued user-defined functions. So this gives me a conclusion of user-defined functions. And we are left with multiple, the kind of the concepts that are left with us is that triggers and other ones is called like we missed about cursors. So One thing it should be noted about is that we use temp tables, table variables, and cursors. For same one or the other way, these three entities result in the same what you call purpose. So these three are for the same purpose, but the way we store into and the way it behaves and the way it occupies the memory all matters. So we have completed with table variables and temporary tables, and we will discuss cursors and as well as triggers in the tomorrow's session. I'm stopping my recording on the screen share here.